Alrighty, so Hollywood actress and 3 times Oscar nominee Octavia Spencer was on Marc Maron's WTF podcast. If you're not familiar with Marc Maron, well, he has this podcast that he runs at his house where he invites many of these special guests, elites, actors, comedians, musicians to his house to talk about the current, political cycles and things going on in America. Probably the kind of stage that I want to get to one day. But anyways, you guys, Octavia Spencer, whilst in the podcast, said something about LA that somewhat rubbed Marc Maron the wrong way, because Marc Maron is an elite and the things that she was saying about LA did not really sit too well with him. So it led to a little bit of an exchange that I want to get into on this video, because there are some concepts that we get from Hollywood, probably from LA and all of that stuff, and about Hollywood and LA itself that needs to be cleared out over the course of this particular video. So without further ado, let's get straight into what actress Octavia said that kind of like rubbed Marc Maron the wrong way, and then we go from there. I'm going to share my opinion as I go along. Please feel free to share yours in that comment section below. Without further ado, let's get straight into the meat and the potatoes of this video. So actress Octavia Spencer says LA is more racist than her Alabama hometown. How dare her? Really? So what really sparked this off is the discussion's catalyst was when Spencer began talking about growing up in Montgomery, Alabama, following the periods of intense civil unrest over civil rights for Black America. She said, "It's a beautiful place and beautiful people," talking about Alabama. I love being from there, she told Maron. But this didn't sit well with Maron, like I said, and he responded by saying, "But it's like it's heavy," Maron responded, to which she also responded back by saying, "I think everywhere is heavy. Everywhere has its history in, you know what I mean. I think everywhere has problems," Spencer answered. And that's 100% correct, in my opinion. Everywhere has its history. Everywhere in the world has its history. Even Africa, we have our bad histories, and even some parts still have bad current things going on. So, but when it comes to SJWs, they want to stick to specific selected history. And Maron, responded by saying, "Sure," Maron responded, but he still insisted problems in other areas were not quite as historical and dug in as that of Alabama. In other words, what he's trying to insinuate is there is no possible way, given the racist history of Alabama, that it could be less racist today than LA, even though somebody who lived there and has now moved to LA is telling him otherwise. Such is the sort of bubble that they live in. And when it comes to Maron, he appears to me, seems to me to be an SJW or an SJW advocate, kind of like a devil's advocate for SJW, in my own opinion, because when it comes to SJWs, they never want to let go of this selected history, particularly white SJWs. They don't want the Black people to let go. It is impossible for them to actually see a Black person who knows the history that is not holding it to heart and saying, "Hey, this didn't affect me, it affected other people beyond me, and so that's not my lived experience." They want it to be our lived experience, but I'm glad that she wasn't falling for it. Anyway, Maron then drilled in further on the racist history of Alabama, citing a history of racial events that have taken place there in the past. Like I said, when it comes to these SJWs, they never want Black people to let go of the past. And my guess would be, plus from the fact that I've spoken to some of them personally, my guess is many of them feel guilt and they feel like they need to repair or reverse the past, something that either has already been done in terms of repairing the past or reversing the past, which is absolutely impossible. There's nothing that you can do today to reverse the events of the past. No matter how much you let Black people be racist towards white people or allow things or say whatever we want about white people, because you can clearly see the double standards where Black people can clearly say things like white people have evil ingrained in them and nobody says anything about it. However, if a white person says that about a Black person, all hell let loose. So no matter how we do that, it's not going to make any changes whatsoever. And the way forward, and for most people that know this and understand this, is to remember the past, Make sure it doesn't happen again, but don't let it define you, which is what Octavia Spencer was saying here. Beautifully, she responded to him. After he tried to cite the racist history of Alabama, she responded beautifully and said, listen, you can't deny that the Southern history is intense. It is. Spencer responded, but what's beautiful for me is that stuff preceded me. I was a child of the 70s, so I was born in 1973. And then as you grow older and the things that you can remember that wasn't part of my history, I learned about it, but it's not anything I experienced. So why do you want me to act like as if I experienced it? That's kind of like what she was telling him right there. But he wasn't having it. He wasn't happy about that kind of response. So he said, did it hang over the family in any way? Maron questioned, like, did it affect you guys in any way, that racist past? And this is what she had to say. No, my mother definitely taught us about the world and harsh realities of the world and history. But growing up in Alabama, if I'm going to be honest, I felt more racism when I first moved here than I ever had in Alabama. So she used the word ever twice about a liberal city where it's supposed to be less racism, but there is more racism there. Spencer said it was very interesting because of perception, you know. Beautiful. It was like, oh, California is going to be this free and liberal thinking place. Spencer responded, honestly speaking, this woman is speaking my language. And honestly, this woman needs to be protected at all costs. She needs to be protected at all costs because I know a lot of liberals out there, especially a lot of these elites out there, would not be happy about her saying this. But that's the reality of progressivism. When you're pushing ideologies that segregates people and separate people, ideologies that makes people call for segregation, all in the name of safe space, diversity and inclusion and all of that stuff. What do you expect when people are more divided, when they feel like one group is an oppressive group and the other group is a victim? Well, what do you think is going to be thriving? Racism is going to be thriving. And also there's a misconception about racism. A lot of people, when they talk about racism, they always picture it being a white person being racist towards a black person. Well, a Pew study that was conducted in 2013 in America actually showed the exact opposite, that people now perceive black people as more racist than white people. Why? Because of these progressive ideologies that is being implanted and imbibed in many black people's head. But thank goodness there are people like this, Octavia Spencer, who's not sitting for all those things, who's not using her infinity stones of wokeness, being black, being a bit big bone, and also being a woman as a crutch to not make it. Perfectly good excuses not to make it when you count yourself as a victim, which is what many of these SJWs want us to be. So Spencer's comment appeared to catch Maron off guard, who still insists racism is ingrained in Alabama culture, but he noted racism elsewhere, like in LA, might just be due to an awkward understanding of the concept. So whose fault is that? An awkward understanding of the concept. It's your ideology. It's your progressive ideology that is leading to this so-called awkward understanding of the context. So in the end, he does admit that LA is more racist than Alabama, but tries to do some mental gymnastics to make excuses for why that is. Honestly speaking, God bless Octavia Spencer for sticking to this truth. Hopefully this changes one life out there. Honestly, it would be worth it if it does. And yeah, we need to protect this woman at all costs.